Chapter 46. Liberation Day 9. Ernst Smith. Ernst Smith reporting in, the Shoshan said. The image on the screen was of the upper body of a Gyron wearing dull black armor. Hello, Doctor, the Raven Hawk clone said from behind their armored mask. I await your status update. Javril Thade's forces have a lock on planetary security, but we've been unable to gain control of the defense grid. We've encountered more resistance than anticipated. There have been no sightings of Mistress Kaylani or Maze Lesset. We just don't have enough forces to secure the temple complex. We require reinforcements. What are your instructions? There was a long pause before Ravenhawk answered. There has been an unforeseen development. We will not be able to send the planned reinforcements. I want you to recall half of your forces and issue a statement declaring that the Kaylani Dominion has fallen to the Cayman Separatist front. Only Mistress Kaylani herself can counter the claim. During the chaos, I want you to take the Gamaro facilities on the southern continent. The workers who have been forcibly sent there should jump at the opportunity to fight for their freedom. I've included a list of individuals hoping for a chance to rebel and their known skills. Secure a vessel with bombing capability there and just level that complex. Once the nation has fallen, I'll have possession of Erosha handed over to Visa Krishnak as previously agreed. Yes, sir, Ernst said with a broad smile as he accepted the attached data packet. His smile was replaced by a scowl as soon as he disconnected. Everything was wrong. He'd suspected he'd been dealing with multiple Ravenhawk clones for some time. That pause confirmed he was dealing with Raven 9, the only cyberpathic clone this time. The one he'd spoken with earlier was concerned with the unexpected appearance of that lamentic child, and this one hadn't mentioned them at all. Reports had come in that lamentic ships were blockading several Kaylani worlds until the current crisis was over. If the capital fell, they could easily claim the planets for themselves. Ernst opened a new message directing a strike force to scale the hotel exterior to infiltrate the upper floors. Their objective was to find and capture that lamentic. Whoever they were must be a potentially valuable bargaining chip if only one Ravenhawk clone was willing to mention them. Too important to let Smith know who they were or how valuable they were. They'd undoubtedly make an excellent bargaining chip, and he had no objection to publicly executing her if the Lamentics refused to withdraw their forces, and better yet, the blame would fall on the Cayman Separatist front, which he hated as much as the Terran supremacists. Jamie. The majority of soldiers that were stomping around the hotel tracking mud across the clean floors were Lupian, but not all. A team of Caymans had spent an hour trying to gain access to the elevator shaft, just to discover it was locked in position in the second sub-basement, and the top had been torn open. They lowered a rope and sent down a team of Mongani to investigate while the technicians stayed behind. I told you there wasn't anything down there, Jamie sighed as they returned empty-handed. We have new orders, one of the technicians said as they held their tablet toward the lead Mongani. We're having problems securing a sky bus, so they've ordered us to scale the building. Do be careful, Jamie said, hiding her resentment behind a pleasant smile. I don't believe our insurance covers that sort of injury. A few moments after the invaders walked away, she heard a rapid scraping sound echoing down the elevator shaft. Did they forget one? She wondered aloud. A small child swung down from above the open door and landed just inside the lobby. They were wearing Kali's fox mask with the dark cloth behind it completely covering the back of their head. They looked Terran with exception of the long dark claws at the end of their fingertips. The claws vanished in a puff of black smoke, revealing much shorter claws underneath the miasma. Seru Cass, the child said in a soft feminine voice. Hello there, Jamie said as calmly as she could manage. She pointed to her ears and frowned. Mama Kali told stay, they said in broken common. Hungry feed. Can this day get any stranger? Jamie sighed as she motioned for the child to follow her. They had cute little teeth and little claws, but something about that kid made Jamie feel incredibly uneasy. Maybe it was how silently they walked or... Wait, why don't they have a shadow? After leading them to the kitchen, Jamie rushed back to her post, hoping that would be the end of it. Trudy. It had been a while since her date ditched her, but Kali had her own way of dealing with things. It had been pretty quiet since the guards dispatched those walking rocks. Half of the supposed security guards had been called away a little while ago. Unfortunately, the ones who refused to leave were the most lecherous of the group, and most resistant to abiding to consent laws. She had done her best to make sure everyone was safe. She went so far as to challenge one of the guards to a dick measuring contest, and presenting hers as proof just to make sure the other guards backed down, and to make them worry what the women they were hitting on had in their pants. She heard whispers that a guard tried groping Jamie with equally disappointing results. She glanced toward the main bar as she thought of Jamie and saw them rushing away from the kitchen. I wonder what that was about, Trudy thought to herself, then waited for an opportunity to head to the kitchen unnoticed. Cassie. Her new brothers had told her Mama Kali was a lot stronger than Mama Sam, but it scared her how much difference there was. Ziku and Yuri competed to see which of them was stronger by testing which one could hold on to her longer. Mama Sam held her hand when she went through the funny tunnel, but it hurt her a lot. She avoided contact with her and clenched her jaw when she did. Mama Kali said Cass couldn't hurt her, and she meant it. She had so many shiny colors all blended together. There were shiny golden streaks where the three primary colors met. There wasn't a black or white spot pulling the colors into a vortex like the Lamentics she was used to seeing. It just kept moving like the eye of a storm. The person near the elevator was weird. They didn't have any colors at all, looked directly at Cass, and even spoke to her after being told who she was. Things were different at Mama Sam's. They called her Cass there. She could visit the gardens and eat anything she wanted. It was hard to know who could and couldn't see her until she tried talking to them. The place Mama Kali lived was scary. There were lots more people and some felt like danger. The place she was brought to was nice though. There was a cool cabinet full of meat which didn't have any green or gray bits yet, and the juice didn't even have a film on top. It was still new and still smelled good. She sat on the floor under a counter, pulling apart the ribs of some unknown animal to expose meat between them. Her clawed hands were coated with the animal's sticky blood, which tickled as it drizzled down her chin. She realized how loud the smacking noises were as she heard the clanking sound of high-heeled shoes. She clutched the rack of ribs close to her chest as the sound grew closer. Both heels clicked against the tile floor. There was an Udbar we did an emergency patch job on earlier. Bruno said they had come with a Lamentic girl. Was that you? A soothing feminine voice asked in the Lampharian variant of her native tongue. Can you understand me, sweetie? They asked. Yeah, Cass squeaked nervously. She understood the phonetic differences, but the woman's enunciation was strange. I know this feeling. That's your fear, not mine. I'm no threat to you. I'll need you to calm down just a little. Can you do that for me? Cass didn't understand what she meant. She wasn't telepathic. How could other people feel her fear? She clutched the meat tightly against her chest and peeked over the counter. The woman was wearing a black pantsuit. She didn't look scary or very scared and didn't have any special colors. What do you have there, sweetie? The woman asked. Oh, that must be it. It's okay. I promise not to take it from you if you can relax a bit. I see you're wearing Kali's fox mask, the woman said warmly. She's a good friend of mine. Cass eased her grip. I can't. I don't know how, Cass whimpered. Just concentrate on the sound of your heartbeat and take long deep breaths, the woman said. Why am I scared? Cass wondered. The woman sat on the edge of the counter and crossed her legs. Are you feeling better now? The woman asked. Cass lowered her head slightly, then raised her face but didn't make eye contact. It's okay if you want to keep hiding behind that mask, but you're making a mess of your dress. If you're hungry, how about I bring you out to the buffet table in the main room and you can eat your fill? Oh silly me, I'm called Trudy. What should I call you? The woman said warmly. I'm called Cass now, Cass said timidly. Mama Kali told me to stay upstairs, but I got hungry. I'm sure she'll understand, Trudy soothed. That meat tastes a lot nicer when it's cooked. It's easier to eat too. Let's clean you up and fill your belly. Touching me hurts people, Cass said. Is that so? The woman giggled. You came to the right place then. There are all kinds of ways to touch someone without actual skin contact. Wait here. I'll be right back. Oh, while I think of it, how old are you? 3, Cass said. I would have guessed older, Trudy said. You're a full Lamentic, I take it. That would make you the equivalent of... what? A Terran 9-year-old. Cass shrugged. I'll ask Kali later, Trudy chuckled softly. I'll let everyone know we'll be entertaining a special guest representing the second touchstone until she gets back. Gauri. This system was named Echelon after its rulers, the Ashila race. They were known to be the only Terran-like species with 6 arms, but so far she'd only seen one individual with more than 2, and that was on a public broadcast. The E2 were working with Grax, and Samsarans functioned as liaisons between them and the local government. Most of the work crews were sent out to search houses for plague victims and burn their remains in freshly dug pits, while others were sent on missions to search the sewers and other areas for more bodies for the pyres. Grax had his own agents among the E2 that were sent on special assignments which the local authorities were unaware of. He added them to the regular work crews from time to time to keep up appearances. The group was currently housed in an old apartment building which they'd cleaned out previously. Despite their efforts to air it out, the smell of death still hung in the air. She was supposed to be a technical advisor to help them learn to control drones, and hopefully, eventually convert them to actual fighters. She wanted to search for Syntholo, but she wouldn't have a chance of doing that unless she earned their trust first. Grax wanted her to help the group take a communications bunker on Delta. She needed to find a way to get them inside and take control of the equipment. She didn't know how she'd do it, but she was determined to find a way. Her reunion with her beloved was at stake. Syntholo. Akia's training corps had spent the last 2 days running reconnaissance missions on the Silshi internment campsites while she was away dealing with health issues. Both sites had really tight security. The E2 seemed eager to have Syntholo lead them into battle to save the species that had once saved them, but Syntholo would feel a lot more comfortable waiting for Akia's return and liberate both camps the same night, with each of them leading an infiltration team. Tactically, it made the most sense. He was surprised to have met her here. They'd fought on opposite sides of the Geladian conflict. He had respected her as an adversary then and admired her willingness to cast all that aside and so willingly agree to work with him. She was quick to admit she was using him for the benefit of her cause. Her honesty was refreshing, although he was loath to admit she reminded him of the woman he'd broken his vow with. Then again, he was free of all that now. His devotion to Mistress Kaylani was based on a lie. He'd come to accept that. He wasn't ready to walk away from his lifetime of solitude, but it was nice being in the presence of a woman that preferred to see him in his Terran form. Oleander. The Pilth Stargate awaited final coordinate confirmation. Oleander sat at the helm of his capital ship, with the leaders of 3 Lamentic houses finalizing negotiations on a split-screen display. The majority of his usual fleet hadn't been approved for the military deployment he was hoping for, but after a group claimed to have toppled the government, it was easy to get approval to send forces to stabilize the region. Luna Vishon, Larkspur Zaire and even Malus Rajuk would claim the current Kaylani Dominion planetary systems in the interim. The long rivalry between Malus and Duke Isilgoran had kept his ambitions in check, which was fine by Oleander. He preferred to focus on Erosha while the others argued endlessly. He was only permitted a force of 10 longbows and their support craft to secure the planet. Gainan had offered to double his numbers, but that would take days and time was critical. He was welcome to move in after Oleander had finished the job. That was his prerogative. It wouldn't be the first time. Hey Lech King, pay attention. Larkspur snapped. Everything's settled. You can go now. Is that what you're calling me now? If the crown fits. Luna laughed. Sir, the navigation officer asked. Inform the fleet that we're ready to proceed through the gate. Then send the final sequence. I want the LHC. Indulgence in the middle of the pack. Yes, Captain, the communication officer answered. Can I have permission to sign the messages, Lech King, please? The room was flooded with the sound of giggles, chuckles and outright laughter. Permission denied, Oleander laughed merrily. That pseudonym is restricted to bridge staff. Open a secure channel to the fleet, Oleander instructed. Okay, playtime is over, Oleander said firmly. I need everyone to focus. Link all ships to Team 1's sensor grid to cut down on the destination scan times. Move clear of the exit vector and support the rest of the fleet until the last ship is through. Nobody forget the 3-second rule. That's a long time to be sensor blind. A lot can happen in that time. Be ready to pass telemetry if there are hostiles. The gate activated. Oleander watched as the fleet started moving through the fold to their destination. It was always stressful no matter how many times he sent the fleet through a stargate. Starlinks relayed their sensor data, but there wasn't any link at their point of destination. The advantage of gate travel was that you could take them to wherever you wanted to go. The drawback was not knowing what you were flying into. It was like crossing the threshold into a pitch-black room, hoping not to be attacked until your eyes had time to adjust. Captain, I'm receiving an incoming transmission, the communications officer said. If it's not from Jean, ignore it, Oleander insisted. At this distance, the lightwave communication delay was long enough that if the first ship to arrive sent a warning, his ship would be halfway through the portal before it could be received by the remainder of the fleet, so it had to be from a sender on the Pilth side if the Stargate. Understood. I'll remember to quote you on that later, the communication officer grinned. Oleander knew that look far too well. Send it to my console, he sighed. The ship moved forward in tandem with the fleet. It was a message from Somri. It read, "Bring her home safely," without any indication which her was being referenced. The kid, the ship, her sister? An indication of which home she was talking about would be helpful too. Entering Stargate in 10. The navigation officer counted down until they pierced the event horizon. The ship system restart sequence commenced. It was a failsafe to prevent system failure while the signal start and end points are on opposite sides of the fold. The sensor grid went offline as the bridge section progressed through the Stargate. I always hate this part, Oleander grumbled. Oh, we know, the communications officer snickered. I'll notify you as soon as the other side of the communication array reconnects. It was a waiting game. Roughly 3 seconds after each system passed through the gate entirely, they would come back online. This was less problematic in smaller vessels. The Longbow-class starships with their spinal gravity cannons would be highly vulnerable during folded space transit if not for the omnidirectional cannons mounted on their support craft. The segmented systems would come online first. Damage control and proximity sensors were first to reintegrate into the central control module. One by one, each region resumed operation. The tech team verified the operation of each. Sending a capital ship through folded space was always a major production, although most captains didn't seem to appreciate how much was involved. Everyone had their task to perform, including the computer core, which he thought of as a crew member. He suspected ships were typically referred to with feminine pronouns because ignoring their needs would ruin everyone's day. We're receiving data from Group 1 now, the girl monitoring the sensors said. Notify me as soon as the Indulgence's native systems are able to take over, Oleander said. Yes, Fleet Admiral Orwell, she responded in an obnoxiously formal tone, but she was new. It was to be expected. Captain's a verb. Use it, Oleander insisted. I've never heard of someone admiraling a ship. Yes, Captain. She sounded nervous. Oleander was sure he knew all the women assigned to his command, but he didn't recognize this mousy little one. She must have been reassigned while they were docked at the array. Stress leads to errors, Oleander said firmly. Just focus on the task at hand. Is there anything to report on short or mid-range? I think so, she said as she stared at the readout, but it doesn't make sense. I'm reading 2 fighter squadrons, but there is no sign of a carrier or other point of deployment. Trace back their flight path for signs of debris, Oleander instructed. Not yet. She sounded frustrated. We're still piggybacking on Group 1's signal. The array is connecting now, the communications officer said. We've been sent a firing solution on those fighters, the sensor girl said. Continuing forward. The third group is proceeding through now, the navigation officer said. Funny, I don't remember asking for a firing solution, Oleander snickered. Our primary objective is to stabilize the region. We're here to assist in thwarting a coup attempt. For now, we shouldn't be targeting anyone unless we're fired upon first. Yes, Captain, but... Comms. Contact the fleet. Nobody fires without my approval. Captain, the 1st Division has received a request for assistance from the starport, the communications officer said. Have they? Oleander snickered. And where did we get the targeting information on those fighters from? The station, the sensor girl said. That's what I thought. Relay this to the 1st group and 3rd as well on a time delay. I want them to receive this as soon as their communication grid comes back online. Ladies, I'd like to welcome you to an ill-conceived trap. The Erosha defense has been breached by a cyber attack. The autonomous systems will open fire on ships flagged as aggressors. Those fighters are current flagged as friendlies. We're not. No one is to fire until I receive word from one of our cyberpaths. Until then, defensive actions only. Captain, about that starport assistance request. The communications officer sounded stressed. Standard command protocol was to refer to crew members by their station. Oleander knew the names of all the members of his regular crew, but used them sparingly to avoid the appearance of favoritism. Of course, that didn't mean he didn't have his favorites, but that had more to do with the sharpness of their tongues than physical attributes. Mandy was on comms this shift. Her crewmates called her Mayday. Something was troubling her, it had to be serious. Mandy, you should know by now I couldn't read your mind if I wanted to. We're all grateful for that, Captain, she said mirthlessly. I just wish I could say that of the commanding officer of Group 1. They keep insisting there's a high court rep on that station. I've tried asking for the agent's authorization ID, but they won't respond to my inquiries. Who is captaining the LHCL 5831's combat group today? Oleander asked. Wrath Hessian. Really? Oleander mused. He looked at the gunnery staff sitting in a depression on the bridge. Sensor Ops, please send firing solution to our gunners, he said. Target Wrath's command ship and that station. Specifically the docking areas. I don't want anyone firing, just give them a loud ping. Make sure they know where we're aiming. Captain, the girl on sensor sounded scared. That's an order, Oleander said forcefully as the many display screens around the bridge began to return to operation. Transmitting now, the girl said. Captain, Mandy snickered, Wrath is demanding to speak with you. I thought that would get her attention, Oleander smiled. Patch her through to my station directly. Wrath screamed and raged over his headset. He held it away from his ear while talking to his own crew. I know you're new here, but I'm sure Mayday understands. Wrath is the most unpleasant lamentic woman I've ever met. She has a real talent for being disagreeable. The last time she was invited to our grand gala, she was detained for starting a fight before even leaving the dock. I wouldn't call her hot-headed, she just hates everyone, he said with remarkable calmness. Her acting like the person on that station is someone she cares at all about is like standing on a hill, waving a big red banner. Wrath stopped yelling. There's a telepathic power called false friend. It's a subtle form of mind control that makes people respond more agreeably. I've found the effect is easily broken with a little cognitive dissonance. Those sorts of abilities just don't work on me, Oleander said slyly. Wrath is no longer connected, Mandy informed him. Well done, Oleander smiled warmly. I want all weapon systems trained on that station and prepared to fire. Comms officer, notify me when the station commander is ready to talk. Connect them directly to my station, and make sure to keep Jean and her people appraised of the situation. The varied large screens displayed area scanner output, a text message log, basic targeting information, and some supplemental information. The data sent to the individual workstations was far more comprehensive. Oleander was a strong advocate of cross-training, and held to the belief that more eyes focused on resolving problems led to better results. In this case, he just wanted Mayday double-checking the new girl's work. Working alongside a veteran crew member was likely to affect her confidence and performance. If she felt like a senior member of staff had her back, it should help her in the long run, especially a woman who stood her ground as readily as Mandy. The sensor screen flickered and the fighter squadrons vanished from the display. Captain, the girl running sensors started to say. They were all just sensor ghosts, Mandy said calmly while looking at him. I guess it was a trap. Captain, I just picked up a scout-class ship breaking cloak by opening fire near the moon, the sensor girl said, but I can't get a reading on what it's firing at. Track that ship's position and its target vector, Oleander instructed, then snickered. That little ship isn't our business right yet. Inform me if that changes. Oleander recognized it as one of Tyrell's mongoose models. It was probably the ship Prask took here, but why ruin a perfectly good pretext? I'd rather not be charged for the unnecessary loss of assets. Corporate or otherwise. They'll seek compensation. I'd rather not give the Kalvraj family more reasons to question our Zarina's judgment. Oleander smirked. Comms, send a message to all docked ships instructing them to depart to the Fellowship Fleet standby location and prepare to be inspected prior to departing the system. Any vessels that refuse to comply will be considered forfeit by their faction. Make sure not to paraphrase. I want everyone to know the Fellowship's role. After sending that, charge the 3rd Division with enforcing those orders. That should keep them beyond the range of the planetary defenses. With exception of our ship, our combat group will be joining them. Yes, Captain, Mandy said. What are your orders for the 1st Division? The outcome of most majority fleet engagements is set in motion before the first shot is fired. That's Wrath's unit, Oleander rolled his eyes. Send her this message. Once we have confirmation from Jean's people, her Hessians can do as they please, including securing that station. I don't understand, the new girl blurted out. The Hessians are managed by House Etar, Mayday said. Our captain will expect them to clean up their own mess. I'm sure House Etar's involvement with the unperfect breeding program has nothing to do with it. Too far, Oleander scolded. Houses Etar and Goran might have started the program, but House Killen had been overseeing the program for the last half-century or so. The grudge he held against House Etar had nothing to do with any of that. If there was one area where he was sure he could rely on Ganon's backing, It would be opposing House Etar's handling of Phoebe Nascally. They demanded she be banned from breeding after the loss of her child. While Oleander was sure Guinan would never admit it, he suspected that's why he'd sheltered Cass so long and seemed so willing to hand her over to Sommary. Captain, we're receiving a message from Larkspur's Air. Should I send it to your screen? Mandy asked. Her house held ties to the Kaylani Dominion, which ran as deep as their connection to the High Court. Larkspur's true military strength was well disguised behind the respect she'd earned back while Baron Deloric was still the head of the mercantile marines. When government-sanctioned action was too restrictive, they could be relied on. Considering the volume of Karzon among their ranks, stamping down a Cayman separatist movement suited their agenda as well as his own. Send her a direct message, Oleander said. Precise wording. I'm feeling agreeable today as long as it doesn't involve her sister or Wrath. Mandy tilted her head, then confirmed the message before sending it. That station commander's been really quiet. I don't like it. What's he waiting for? Oleander remarked. I hope he hasn't wormed his way into any of the other commanders' heads. I've just detected an explosion near that moon, the new girl said as she noted the location on the main display. I'm sorry, Captain, but I lost that scout craft in the debris field. Did you? Oleander mused. Just what I'd expect from their student. She's good, I'll give her that. From what Jean had told him, her control of the grid was limited and incomplete. The system could only respond to weapon fire based upon the friend or foe system, which was supposed to be inoperative, and had made those sensor ghosts an obvious ploy. It was a clear indicator there was someone on the other side accessing the network. It may have been a team down on the surface or a cyberpath, but Jean had her own team of hackers who worked alongside her. The outcome of the struggle to control the security grid seemed clear. It was just a matter of time. Oleander smiled watching the screens as he issued more orders. The planetary defenses should start treating us favorably any time now. Watch for it. Notify Wrath when it's clear for her Valkyrie task force to move in. The Midnight Fellowship had an agreement with the Kaylani Dominion to assist with maintaining Erosha's planetary security. After securing the station to prevent a political nightmare, he'd be handing the station over to the Fellowship. Officially, they were just rendering aid to the current governing body, which hopefully would add a coup prevention clause to future versions of their treaties. There had still been no official statement issued by Mistress Kaylani. To appease the fierce devotion of the citizenship, the Lamentic Empire would be overseeing the administration of 7 of the 8 star systems formerly under Dominion control until Mistress Kaylani returned to power. The Midnight Fellowship was to take charge of Erosha during that time. It was a quick but elegant solution to the current crisis. The Lamentic houses involved had maintained good relations with the peoples of those systems for centuries and would likely be seen as protectors of Kaylani rather than invaders. I just received a message from Jean, Mandy said. There's no more interference. I'm guessing that explosion was some sort of hidden communications relay. Is that her guess or yours? Oleander said coldly. Mine, Mandy admitted. Sorry, Captain. But in fairness, someone at the station is trying to contact us directly all of a sudden. I'll notify Wrath now. Patch him through to my station, Oleander chuckled softly. The Cayman Separatist Front was a social movement striving for equality in TazCorp hiring practices. Other than a few Lupian tribes and a Monguni activist group that felt they were superior to and underappreciated by Terrans, it was predominantly a Cayman movement. There was reportedly some representation of the vulpine subspecies within their numbers, but not many. That being the case, why were there a pair of Karzons staring back at him with a Cheshire standing just behind them? Had the mercantile marines somehow taken over the station before Wrath's people even moved in? Oleander studied the Cheshire's eyes. They seemed too steady, too focused. He was likely a white Shishan who could pass for a Cheshire, making him half Cayman. Knacks were virtually unheard of among Karzon, making them particularly vulnerable to someone using mind-altering abilities. Oleander waited as the Karzon prattled on about having taken over station security and wanting to make sure they wouldn't be fired upon when they departed for the southern continent. The girl monitoring the ship sensors tried to get his attention. Please hold, Oleander said as he cut the audio. Captain, I just detected a black ship pull in to dock with the station. It's unregistered, but from the ship design it appears to be an escape craft. Any life signs? He asked. Checking now, the girl said. Yes, sir. He glanced over at Mandy. There's nothing to report, she said. Tag it for tracking, but that's all for now, Oleander instructed. So sorry about that, Oleander said as he re-enabled the transmission sound. I can't permit any departures for the surface right now. The Karzan seemed unfazed, but the glare that briefly passed across their companion's face made it clear who was pulling their strings. Interesting ploy, but it won't work, Oleander grinned while locking eyes with the Shishan. You should probably just send them back to their ship. They're no use to you now. I imagine they'll forget all about you during their walk back. I'd do it quickly if I were you. This may be our only chance to chat before my people arrive. Oleander waited until the Karzan had been dismissed, then sent a message to Jean asking her to do what she could to seal him in the room, and a second message to Mandy directing her to ask the Fellowship for more information on the Gamaro facilities on that southern continent. There was currently a corporate-mandated sensor blackout in effect, and the Shishan had just given him reason to care. So, he said, turning his attention back to his display console, I take it you're the mastermind behind this little plot. I'm Fleet Admiral Oleander Atom Orwell and you are. Who I am isn't important to you, the Shishan started to say. Don't bother trying to use suggestion, false friend, beguiling, delusion, daydream or any of that psionic nonsense on me. Don't waste my time or yours. It won't work. What are you, a cyberpath or something? The Shishan mocked. Oleander turned his head as if he were addressing someone off-screen, shrugged and said, I guess he's never actually met a real Lamentic before. Should I send down a Deneric to forcibly rip the information out of his head? Oleander was bluffing, but truth detection would prove as ineffective as any of his other mental abilities his interlocutor attempted to use. Dr. Ernst Smith, the Shishan sneered. A file opened on his terminal as the name was spoken. Oh, you were a TAS Corp researcher who worked on the Super Cayman project, I see. Shame it turned into such a fiasco. They were just trying to make better secretaries, Oleander snickered. They should have reconsidered the project branding. So, is that why you're siding with the Cayman separatists? Are your pets not getting the respect you feel they deserve, and by proxy neither are you? Mandy held her fist in front of her face, then extended her fingers to let him know Jean had completed her task. I'd prefer to take you alive, Oleander grinned. I have a friend who would very much like to meet you. You inconvenienced a friend of hers. Sent off to die or something like that. Captain, Mandy said urgently, I think you'll want to read this. Smith looked defiant yet curious. Oleander looked over the message from Sommery. Oh, Dr. Smith, Oleander snickered, it's for you. Would you like me to read it? Smith smirked. Nelfree sends her best, Oleander recited. Ernst Smith grabbed his head and fell to the floor screaming. All hail the Queen, Oleander laughed and terminated the connection. Summary. She sat in a comfy chair on the battle bridge watching the feed from the room Ernst Smith was being held in. Watching him writhing on the floor. The limitations of losing her psionic capabilities were frustrating, but her sister soul was eager to seek vengeance on Nelfree's behalf. Sommery just wished she could do it herself. Feeling better now? Tyrell asked from the main control unit. Kivaz is just being thorough. I told her what Gowroon put Nelfree through to get her all fired up. She's just making him pay for that too. It seems a bit excessive to me, Tyrell remarked. She said she'll end him once they're back on the surface, Sam shrugged. The way I see it, I won't know my daughter's safe until he stops screaming. Suit yourself, Tyrell sighed. The system attacks have ended, so I'm going to take a break now, unless you need me for something else. Can you queue up a mongoose build with seating for the twins? Sam asked. Tyrell nodded. I want to take them both on a trip to Hyrule to celebrate, then enjoy your break, Sam said warmly. I'll get started on that, Tyrell chuckled. I'm starting to think I may be the busiest retired person in history. It has better perks than most real jobs, Sam laughed. Oh, about that, Tyrell said. That salvage crew has been asking about getting better medical coverage, but they won't be able to consistently make enough to cover the costs, unless you're planning on starting more wars. As long as they're keeping Shinji away from other people, I'm fine with it, Sam smirked. I still can't believe he thought Cass was my new body. That's just creepy. Kiryu. They had shut down Alliance arms early today. The Kaylani Dominion had come under attack. It may be on the other side of the galaxy, but they were attacked by a group of fanatics. Hyrule was still officially a neutral port, a fact that had everyone on edge. This was unprecedented. The Kaylani Dominion had maintained neutrality for longer than any other nation. They were peacekeepers. Mistress Kaylani and her officials had been included in the negotiation of thousands of treaties and had presided over the signing of thousands more. They were respected by so many other nations and factions. They helped maintain the galactic economy by doing their part to stabilize the value of the Galcred. The most reliable banks in Corellis were located within their borders. They offered rations to billions of people throughout the galaxy, forcing down the prices of non-luxury food items. Who would attack them and who'd negotiate on their behalf? If you weren't safe in Kaylani space. Politics had never been her thing, but this seemed insane and counterproductive. She had heard about some college protests organized by students radicalized by the writings of Javril Thades and his Monguni co-author, Dr. Something or other, but she hadn't given it much thought. Every major school taught about how revolutionary movements inevitably fail, so why hadn't this one? Then again, even she'd heard of Thades. It was only because his last book was a big deal. It was a best-selling cookbook loaded with interspecies recipes. Her personal tablet beeped. It was Nelfree and the message sounded urgent. Kiryu opened up a call which was answered immediately. I don't feel safe and I don't want to be alone, Nelfree said in a shuddering voice. Tell me where to meet you, Kiryu said with a forced smile. Gestasio's, Nelfree said. Weird place to go if you already feel unsafe, Kiryu said apprehensively. It's a shielded building, Nelfree smiled weakly. The owner scares me more than looking in my own grave, but for you I'll go, Kiryu said to reassure them both. I better leave before I lose my nerve. Best bitch ever, Nelfree said quietly. Count on it. No change, Kiryu said as she grabbed her keys off the table. Remember that guy who tried to kill me, Nelfree said as Kiryu walked over and waved the key past the lock. Samari called. She invited me out to celebrate his death with her. That must be a relief, Nelfree said while opening the door. Maybe, Nelfree said solemnly. I just don't know how to feel. With everything going on up in Kaylani space, Kiryu said, hoping to change the topic, today has been a crazed run for everyone. It's like the entire universe is holding its breath waiting to see what's going to happen next. Samari said Smith was behind that too, Nelfree said in a strained, uneven voice. I'll be there as soon as I can, Kiryu said urgently. Just wait for me inside, okay? Nelfree nodded. Kiryu watched the screen as a massive Gorgalian ushered her inside, then disconnected the call.